Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. I'm Nipasa Pradhan, and I'm very thrilled to have all of you join us today. Yes, whether you have joined us on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and very happy to tell you that before we dive into today's topic, I really want to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed immigration attorney, none other than Prashant Dubey, who has graciously agreed to join us once again today and to shed some light on the topic that is for today, the challenges surrounding the H4 EAD processing delays, the strategies to even expedite approval. So, welcome, Prashant. It's truly an honor to have you here once again.
Yep. Thank you, Nipasa, for the introduction. I'm going to go tell my wife that they called me an esteemed immigration attorney now. Makes me feel more important than, than maybe I probably am. But
No,
thank you
you
to
are.
the
You are.
higher thank you to the higher IT team for hosting this session. Thank you to Zayed again for working in the background and making this happen from a technical perspective. I'm glad to be back on the show. Thank you for taking my suggestion on the H4 EAD delay and doing a topic around that. It is something that's really close to my heart. Reason is because for our firm, this was our kind of claim to fame between 2020 to I would say 2022. We did over 500 lawsuits against USCIS over delayed EAD benefits for our clients. And USCIS was getting better about processing times and things of that nature. But over the last, I would say, 3 or 4 months, I'm beginning to see that it's an issue again, right? If you crawl the message boards or just from clients reaching out to me, it seems like more and more people are facing some form of an EAD delay type of a situation, and I'm seeing that become more relevant. So figured it might be the right time to host something or at least put something out in the world about how people might be able to expedite their H4 EAD applications or really other applications that might be out of processing time.
Right, right. And absolutely to all viewers out there also, thank you so much for tuning in. And whether you are a prospective applicant, maybe an immigration enthusiast, or maybe simply curious about the topic, we are very thrilled to have you here. It's going to be a great session today with Prashant, and it's going to be a very informative one. So stick with us. And today's topic is H4 EAD processing delay challenges. So, let's give a sneak peek, Prashant, to the viewers out there. What can they expect from us today before we start with the
Yeah,
questions?
Yeah, so from a high level, we'll talk about, why there might be some processing delays. We'll talk through, what sort of remediation measures people might have, right? If they are facing a delay, what kind of avenues do they have to expedite their approval or at least get their applications adjudicated? We'll talk through a little bit of the historical background on why these delays are really happening and some of the measures that USCIS is even taking to make sure that they are reducing the impact of these delays and they are increasing, at least from an operational capacity, their ability to better process applications.
Right. So it's the one that resonates with many individuals and families, navigating the US immigration system. Friends, let's go to the questions directly and hopefully, whatever doubts you have about the topic or strategies and maybe some questions you have to the attorney directly, please don't forget to comment them wherever you're watching us from, and we'll be very happy to take them. So, Prashant, let's go with the first question I have for you. What are the common reasons for H4 EAD processing delays, and how do they contribute to delays?
Yeah, so there can be several reasons for processing delays, right? And I know the topic is H4 EADs, but I've seen in recent times a lot of delays around 131 applications. So the same, reasons for delays around an EAD might be the same for a 131 application, none of which can be the applicant's fault, right? So in terms of the H4 community feeling like, hey, why am I being singled out for whatever reason? That's not the case. We see delays across multiple categories: 131s for advanced parole, 485 applications for green card, right? People having their priority dates be current, still not being able to have their applications processed, 765 applications, of course, as well. And sometimes it happens because USCIS simply has too much of an influx of applications at a processing center, right? And really not enough staff to support it. Sometimes it can be related to seasonality. So, for example, we've got the H-1B season coming up, and I know USCIS is going to direct a lot of their efforts, a lot of their manpower towards processing H-1B applications until the end of June, right? All of these activities, these seasonality activities, different applications coming in at one processing center and overloading a processing center, this can divert attention away from having your application approved. And so
Hey,
specific, specifically around H4 EADs over the last 5 years, kind of what I've seen, back in 2019, when I first started as an immigration attorney, we used to see one-off cases happening due to delays with biometrics appointments, right? At that time, right, that was a world in which we lived, in which H4s needed to get a biometrics appointment. Doesn't happen anymore, right? So they've improved on that. And essentially, in 2019, they had also introduced the biometrics appointment for H4 EAD applications, right? So that, combined with the fact that in 2020 and COVID-19 and application service centers shutting down, that created a really big backlog across the board for H4 EAD applicants, because they couldn't go to the application service centers and actually submit their biometrics, right? So applications were getting delayed, people were losing their job, people were losing health benefits, and they were like, what do we do, right? And so there are several different um, ways to kind of help people through those processes, and we'll get into a little bit of that as we go through the webinar. But those are the reasons why I've seen H4 EAD delays traditionally when it comes to 765 applications. Now, fast forward to 2023, right? You've got improvements with USCIS operations. You've got new regulations as it relates to automatic extensions, for example, or even USCIS bundling H-1B, H-4, H-4 EAD applications together in terms of expediting approval, right, if they're filed concurrently. And I think there are, measures that have been taken to improve the processing time and make it better for folks. And we're beginning to see some of that. But again, recently I've been seeing more and more delays of 4, 5, 6 months, which maybe between end of 2022 into 2023, I wasn't really seeing that, right? And so, we can present to folks just different ways that you can expedite your process.
all right, talking about it, so from the cases you have dealt with, what was the maximum delay that you have dealt with and the minimum one as well?
Wow. So across categories, I think for a 765 application, the worst I ever saw for an H4 EAD applicant was 16 months, which is just ridiculous, right? Like, this is an application that can take just 5 minutes to approve, right? From USCIS's perspective, especially if the person qualifies. But they were stuck in the process for 16 months, and they approached us to help them expedite it, and we got it for them pretty quickly because they were so far out of processing time that the government really didn't have a leg to stand on to defend their position. When it comes to maybe 485 applications, the worst delay I saw was 7 years, where somebody's application was pending 7 whole years, transferred to different processing centers back and forth. And they approached me because they were like, I don't know what to do. I don't get what's happening, right? And
Exactly.
when they attended their interview, even the USCIS officer said, I don't know why you were pending this long, right? Like, they literally just fell through the cracks, right? So it's been as egregious as multiple years in certain categories, and definitely multiple months when it comes to 765.
All right. Very interesting, but all good, I hope. So, moving on, are specific USCIS processing centers or jurisdictions more prone to delays? And maybe what factors contribute to these differences?
Yeah, yeah. So, kind of speaking from my experience, and after the 500 or so lawsuits we've done on EAD delays, I would say more than half of those lawsuits were filed against the California Service Center, right? This can be because of the sheer population of the state, right? Number of non-immigrants, the volume of H4 EAD cases that they get, right? At least that's what I saw. Recently, I would say California, they've really improved their processing times, and we've been seeing fewer and fewer cases coming out of California for litigation. Instead, what I've been seeing is that Vermont Service Center, which was doing really well, exceptionally well, in fact, for the last couple of years. I've been noticing Vermont um, having delays of 6+ months, right? So on their website, they say, hey, the processing time for your application in Vermont is 3.5 months. But we recently have been filing lawsuits for people to expedite their approval, and their receipt notice date is like June of 2023, right? They've been pending 6, 7, 8 months. They've tried different avenues, different channels to get their approval, and nothing's working, right? um, Unfortunately, right, people can't pick their service center. It will get routed to a service center depending on where you live, depending on which lockbox facility it reaches, and then that lockbox facility will route it to California, Nebraska, Vermont, or Texas. And so people are always like, I really hope my application doesn't go to California. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of hoping based on what I'm seeing now, it doesn't go to Vermont, right? Because if you land in like Texas or California right now, you're probably going to shape out really well. And there might be people out there with stories where they have applications pending even in California, where they're like, "Hey, I'm delayed," and you'll get those one-off cases. But recently, the trend has been towards Vermont in terms of the delays.
Okay. Pretty well intense. I hope that the delays won't be too long, and I hope that everybody will get sorted with their applications very soon. But you know what, Prashant, there are so many folks out there who have joined us, and I'm very happy that you've joined us. Adira, Pavan, Madhura, Sri Devi, um, Marcel. We already have questions coming in. We'll definitely take them up. Stick with us, stay with us in this show, and we'll be happy to answer your questions. Prashant, moving on, the proactive measures. What are the proactive measures that applicants can take if they experience delays? If you can give out some tips, it would be great.
Yeah, yeah. So this is what I was alluding to earlier, which is that there are avenues to try and expedite your approval, right? One of them is raising a simple expedite request with USCIS. Typically, USCIS is going to ask you, hey, what are the grounds for an expedited approval, right? And they list out different categories like humanitarian reasons, financial impact reasons, things of that sort. So, depending on what your situation is, if you're going to lose your job, it can be financial impact. If you're going to lose your job and your health insurance, and you have a child with a disability who's going to lose their health insurance, it might be a humanitarian reason, right? Unfortunately, 90%, probably 99% of expedite requests, they get denied, right? So that's one avenue which may or may not work as well as you want it to. Another is if you are out of processing time, you can always raise what's called a service request. So USCIS has an online tool, right? If you type e-request USCIS in Google, it will take you to their online tool where you can raise a service request for a case that's outside of normal processing time, right? You raise the service request, it basically sends a ping to USCIS that the service request was raised. And they say, hey, we're going to get back to you in 30 to 45 days, is typically what I've seen. Now, even with service requests, the troubling thing with it is Sometimes you will get an approval in 30 to 45 days if somebody does their due diligence and picks up the application, or otherwise you wait that month and a half, and you realize, wow, my application's still not moving, right? So it can be another avenue which can lead to a dead end, similar to an expedite request. Um, the third one is a congressional request, right? So you can reach out to your local congressman, your local congresswoman, um, submit details, right? Like they have on their page um, a kind of a tab that'll say, hey, do you need help with a federal agency? And which federal agency is it, right? Um, so you can reach out to your local congressman and get them to raise an expedite request on your behalf. And sometimes that can help move the needle too. Um, the only thing to think about, right, is USCIS isn't funded by Congress, right? So like sometimes they don't really care what a congressman has to say. If they do reach out, USCIS is funded by um, your like out USCIS fees, right? Um, so those are three avenues that are typically available. Now, if none of that works, right? You've tried everything. That's typically where I'll see people come knocking on my door and say, I want to file a lawsuit. I want to file what's called a writ of mandamus, right? And we'll get into I think that's going to be our next question, is like the strategies, but I'll save those details for the next question. But those are the typical three ways to expedite it. If that doesn't work, we've got a fourth one that we'll address in the next question.
All right. So since we've already um, telling about it, talking about it, so what strategies can applicants use to expedite H4 EAD approval? And can you provide examples maybe of some successful tactics even?
Yeah, yeah. So it kind of in addition to what we've already listed out with the expedite request, service request, congressional request, um, litigation is the most effective option that I've found in my experience, right? Litigation is basically filing what's called a writ of mandamus lawsuit against
Mhm.
USCIS for whatever delay you're facing, right? A writ of mandamus is just really, it's a fancy way of saying, you're going to ask the government to do something by way of going through the courts, right? And that something is the adjudication of your application. And so the way it works is, we file individual complaints and individual lawsuits, right? The reason for that, although it's a slower process, but the reason we don't do group lawsuits and we do individual lawsuits is because we want to be able to highlight your specific facts, your specific situation. So that's one tactic that we use, is we don't do group litigation. We've never done it in the last 5 years we've been in business. And so we work a little bit slower, right? Like at a time, at a peak of litigation between 2020 and 2022, I was doing these webinars every Saturday because I was having 20, 30 people reach out to me a week. And we would only be able to, we would tell them like, hey, attend the webinar on Saturday because there's no way I can scale this out without a webinar, type of a forum. And we would only be able to take about 6 to 7 lawsuits a week, right? And we would get filled up for the entire month. So even though it meant we would sometimes lose business to people doing group lawsuits or other firms, we felt that doing a personalized individual complaint was the most effective approach. And as we continued to do litigation, we found, because of our successes, right? We've done 556 lawsuits now. 553 of them have been approved. We've got 3 that are still pending in court. So the results sort of spoke for themselves as we kept going, as we kept scaling, that, hey, these individual complaints work, right? Um, and so not only does it allow us to personalize your complaint, personalize your lawsuit, and I'll talk about specific examples later on in the webinar, um, in terms of like specific fact patterns that we were able to highlight or things that really stood out to me. But it also meant that when we were working with the other side, so once we file a lawsuit, it gets assigned to a person, and that person is a US attorney from the Department of Justice. So, similar to how I represent my client as a plaintiff, the US attorney represents USCIS as a defendant in the case. And so, the US attorney, it's much easier working with them when you have one client assigned to one complaint, and that US attorney has to, go and reach out to USCIS about that one person, right? And they get credit for that one complaint for closing it out and negotiating it out. Now, if we did a group lawsuit and if we sent 200, I just I blanked out there. But if we filed a group lawsuit and we sent 200 people to that one US attorney, they have no motivation to negotiate with us, right? The reason is because they're going to have to figure out, like, how do I kind of part and parcel 200 different plaintiffs? Like, do I do this by service center, or do I do this by, which officer is assigned to their case? And so, by doing these individual complaints, we were able to build really good relationships with the U.S. Attorney's Office in all of California, Vermont, Nebraska, and Texas. Another tactic we like to implement is, if we have the ability to file your lawsuit in your home state, then we will opt for that, right? Because chances are there's a lot of lawsuits being filed in California, Nebraska, Vermont, and Texas, because that's where the service centers are, right? And so if we have an opportunity to file it in, a state like Michigan, for example, we've had a few clients from there. Maryland, for example, a few clients from there. We will opt to do that. Reason being, sorry, reason being that, again, we're working with the U.S. Attorney's Office in a nature where they're able to take this one complaint. They don't feel overwhelmed by it. They understand that it's one fact pattern, and they can then go work with USCIS. So jurisdiction can play a very big tactic, but I think overall, just having these individualized, personalized complaints has worked really well for us in the past.
Wow, I mean, 556 lawsuits is no joke, but well, friends, I know, thank you so much for joining in, and thank you for all your questions. I can already see a lot of them popping up, but please stay with us. We are going to take up your questions very, very soon. And just wanted to tell you that, you could even mail our Attorney Prashant Dubey directly, if you have any questions and probably want to get some information about something. His email address is info@dubeylawoffice.com. And you can even email me at nipa@hierarchypeople.com, or call me in the number 408-335-6444. And definitely don't forget to visit our website, www.hierarchypeople.com. Prashant, is everything good? I mean, I think you are having you having calls probably.
Yeah. I just had to silence something, so it's all good.
It's okay,
It
cool.
happens.
All
It
right then.
happens.
Definitely, I'm sure you're very much on demand and people do want to get in touch with you. So,
No worries.
oh, talking about it, March is going to be very, very busy, I'm sure, with the H1B lottery thing coming up from the 6th of March. So, how are your preps? Are you going to be very busy?
Yeah. So March is always, I would say March to end of June is always a busy kind of set of 3 months, right? Because you've got the H1B lottery opening on the 6th. You have until the third week of March to make those submissions for the lottery. And then once the submissions come out, you get a couple of months just to submit the H1B applications, submit the labor condition applications. And it always tends to be a busy time of the year, right? But that's good, right? It's good for business. It's good that folks are still very much interested in the H-1B and everything that it has to offer. But I think probably across the U.S., any immigration attorney that you talk to, these are probably the most packed 3 months. And then after the end of June, everybody goes on vacation for like a week, because they're just so burnt out from from the marathon that is the H-1B season.
Right, right. All right, let's get back to our topic again. Prashant, which documents or evidence should applicants prioritize, to expedite their H4 EAD application, and how should they organize them effectively? I think this is one of the questions also from the audience, Adira, if I'm not mistaken. So we're already taking it as we're going. So please tell us.
Yeah, no, perfect. So, I think if the need arises, right, whether it's an expedite request or a congressional request, or, when all else fails, if a writ of mandamus needs to be filed, um, folks are able to get these documents pretty quickly, right? So, for example, your receipt notices for your 539 and 765 application, copy of your passport, copy of your previous EAD card. To make these cases more sympathetic, for example, we sometimes need a letter of support from an employer, or medical records, if the situation calls for it, right? We like to humanize our yeah, our plaintiffs, so that the cases are sympathetic, and we're not really, we're not making anything up here. Everyone has a story to tell, or some harm that they're going to face if they lose their job. And so as a result of that, those are typically the documents that I see. Now, in some circumstances, I've seen extreme situations where, let's say somebody has a child with a disability, right? Medical records in that instance is going to be important. I've seen individuals that if they don't get their EAD cards, these were medical residents, who were saying, like, if I don't get my EAD card, I can't finish my residency program. I have to wait another year, right? So sometimes you're getting letters from the medical school, to make your case stronger. So in one-off situations, in rare situations, you'll see those extremities. But if it's a straightforward kind of EAD delay type of situation, at most you might need an employment verification letter, or some sort of letter from your employer stating, like, hey, if this person doesn't get an EAD card, we're putting them on a leave of absence, or we're going to terminate them, that sort of thing.
All right, all right. Well, we have Rajesh Pillai on Facebook. We will take up your question for sure. Please stay with us, stick with us in our show. Asim, a big hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in. And we are talking about H4 EAD processing delay challenges, and also discussing some strategies maybe to avoid all these delays. So, Prashant, also, there are more questions from my side. Let's go with them first. And this one I wanted to know is, how does the current backlog of H4 EAD applications affect processing times? And is there any indication of when USCIS may address the backlog?
Yeah, yeah. So I think the current backlog definitely extends the processing times for folks, right? That's why we're seeing people, with applications, let's say in the Vermont Service Center, now having to wait 6+ months to get an approval on their EAD applications. If they filed an H4 and H4 EAD application, maybe both of those are stuck, right? Now, over the last few years, I would say there have been many developments that USCIS has implemented, in order to kind of fast track applications or minimize these delays, right? So in November 2021, they created the automatic extension rule for H4 EAD holders. So as long as, for example, if you have an I-94 record that is valid beyond the expiration date of your H4 EAD, let's say it's valid for the next 1 year, right? Your EAD expires today, March 1st, 2024. Your H4 status expires March 1st, 2025. In that situation, as long as you have a timely filed EAD application, you can get a 6-month automatic extension, right? And by that time, if all goes well, you should have your approval within that frame of time, right? And also keep in mind, your time to file, let's say a renewal, opens up 6 months in advance. So technically, you almost get like a year to get your application approved if you do everything correctly. For other categories, for E and L dependents, for example, they now are eligible to work just by virtue of their status, right? You don't need a 765 application in those categories. So they completely eliminated the need for 765 applications for dependents on E and L visas. And for H4 EADs, they still do need to apply for the 765 application. But again, the automatic extension rule definitely makes it easier for them to minimize their delays, right? Another thing USCIS did in around, I think it was May of 2022, they extended the automatic extension from 180 days to 540 days. It is now back to 180 days. And so I think the next step for USCIS and really addressing this, right? Aside from throwing more manpower at it, aside from increasing operational support, aside from implementing better technologies to automate maybe the approval of these applications, I think the other thing they're probably working on is premium processing for H4 EADs, right? So we're already seeing premium processing for F1 students and their 765 applications. Now, we've also seen premium processing getting extended to other categories, right? And other application types over the last year or so. If USCIS had extended it to everyone, it would have just been a mess because they don't currently have the operational ability or the manpower to implement premium processing right away across all categories. So they're kind of slowly rolling it out. So I think further down the line, it's hard to say when, but further down the line, we might see premium processing, take place for these applications as well. And I know USCIS definitely has the goal to implement it. Another thing I would say that they've proactively done is on USCIS's website, they've kind of published these cycle time goals. Now, keep in mind, these are goals, right? So goals can be met. They can also be not met. And so they committed that, hey, look, by October of 2023, we should have the capability to approve 765 applications within 3 months, right? I've seen that in certain scenarios, but I always kind of, I'm seeing Vermont, for example, and some one-off cases from Nebraska where folks are pending 4, 5, 6 months, right? So again, it's their goal, it's their objective to be able to approve these applications in a certain amount of time. I think, maybe they put the cart before the horse and committed to something that they weren't maybe entirely ready for. So in some instances, you see people getting approved in those 3 months. In some instances, you simply don't. And then I think a final thing that they did is the bundling of, and even this has been hit or miss, but they've bundled together H1B, H4, H4 EAD applications such that if you file these applications concurrently, let's say in premium processing, the idea is that they will all be approved together within those 15 days. Now, I've also seen scenarios where the H1B does get approved, the H4 EAD continues processing for another month or another 2 months, right? So USCIS has been kind of hit or miss on both the cycle time goals and also kind of how they adjudicate applications when they're filed concurrently. But those are some of the measures that they've taken, and I think really the probably like we would have to stop litigating if they just did premium processing, right? Like, why would you pay me if you can just pay USCIS a premium processing fee, right? So I think once they implement that, that'll really help move things along for folks.
Absolutely, for sure. And friends out there, thank you so much, whoever have joined us just now as well. Today we are discussing about H4 EAD processing delay challenges and even discussing some strategies and tips. How can we avoid these delays? And we are talking with none other than Prashant Dubey. He is Prashant Rajendra Dubey, an attorney, offering legal services in business and tax and immigration law matters. Today we are covering a lot under this topic, and we are going to cover a lot more. We have maybe some common reasons behind the delays we already covered, highlighting some specific strategies applicants can utilize. So stay with us. We are going to talk even more under the same topic and take up your questions as well from all you folks out there. I can already see a lot coming in. So thank you so much and stay with us. I'll just say. So just going for a short break. We'll be back in a short bit.
Are you an IT consultant seeking a new opportunity? We offer job placement services for US citizens, green cards, EADs, and visa holders. We also sponsor various work visas like H1B, E3, TN, and green cards. 20 plus years of experience in the industry, exceptional employee benefits, highly rated by our employees. Global presence with 200 plus recruiters and direct clients. Connect with us. Call us on the number 833 412 8472 or mail us at support@higheritpeople.com or visit our website www.higheritpeople.com.
Hello and welcome back, everybody, to Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. I'm Nipasa Pradhan, and today we have attorney Prashant Dubey. We are speaking about H4 EAD processing delay challenges. And thank you so much, all you folks, for joining in. Yes, we have already covered a bit, from the topic already, highlighting specific strategies applicants can utilize to expedite their approval, some common reasons also behind the delays, and we are definitely, Prashant is providing some valuable insights, based on his experience as well. So moving on, Prashant, I just got one more question to go before we can take up some questions from the viewers. So have there been any recent policy changes from USCIS impacting H4 EAD processing, and how can applicants mitigate, their effects?
Yeah, so I would say the policy changes, are a lot of what I covered, previously in the last question. But just to kind of summarize them and highlight them, right? There was the creation of the H4 EAD automatic extension rule, right? For E and L dependents, they're now eligible to work incident to their status, right? So USCIS kind of completely eliminated the need for processing a 765 application for E and L dependents. Um, in terms of the automatic extension for H4 EAD holders, that is valid at least right now for 180 days. So as long as you have an I-94 record and an H4 status, that is valid beyond the expiration of your H4 EAD, you can take advantage of working for either up to 6 months or until your H4 status expires, whichever happens first, whichever happens sooner, right? So to give you an example, if, for example, your H4 EAD expires today, March 1st, 2024, and your H4 status is only good until, let's say, June 1st, 2024. As long as you have a timely filed H4 EAD application, you can work for the next 3 months, right? Because that is when your I-94 record will expire, right? If the I-94 H4 status expires a year from now, then you can work for an additional 6 months, right? So you wouldn't have to stop in June, you can stop in September. In addition to that, I think they've also got those cycle time goals where they're committing to process applications within 3 months, kind of hit or miss, right? They've committed to bundle H1B, H4 EAD applications together, so that approvals can happen concurrently, and the H4 spouse isn't waiting several months after the H1B spouse gets their approval. So I would say those are the 4 or 5 things from a policy perspective USCIS has done, to really improve the processing times. And I think, maybe one last one that I didn't cover in the last question was they got rid of the biometrics, right? So a lot of the delays we saw in COVID and during that time was because of biometrics appointments not being issued, not being scheduled, application service centers shutting down, right? So um, at this stage, right, H4s don't have to do a biometrics appointment, which saves you a lot of processing time. So I would say those are the 5 or 6 things that USCIS has done from a policy perspective to improve processing.
All right. All right. So that was my last question. End of discussion. We're done. Bye bye. Just kidding. But we have some more questions. I'm sure there are a lot of questions from the audience out there. So we're going to take them up now. And definitely, before maybe we jump into the questions from our audience, if you have, maybe if you even know someone who has encountered challenges with H4 EAD processing delays, maybe you have some success stories to share as well, please feel free to drop them in the comments below, and yes, we will love to say it out here in the show as well. So let's go with
Yeah.
the questions from our viewers. Which one should we go first? Pavan is asking, my spouse's H1B expired and need to file an H1B transfer. I'm in H4 EAD. Shall I work now or still wait for H1B transfer approval?
Yeah. So if your spouse is H-1B expired, um, and they're in the midst of an H-1B transfer, if their H-1B is expired, then technically you don't have H-4 status, right? Um, so maybe it expired and you filed a transfer plus a renewal, right? Um, if that's the case, depending on when your H-4 status expires, you may or may not have the ability to do an automatic extension. So I would need some additional facts there, right? Specifically dates, right? Dates are really important, especially when you're playing around with automatic extension, things like that. But let's just take the facts on the face. I'm assuming H1B expired, gone, can't use it, right? You can't use your H4 EAD as a result, right? Because if your spouse doesn't have status, then you don't have status as an H4. Therefore, you can't use an H4 work authorization.
Okay. Pavan, I hope you got your answer. But I want to take up this one now from Facebook. This is from Rajesh Pillai. And he says, Hi, Prashant. Thank you for sharing the updates. I have two queries. Would appreciate if you could help with the answers. The first one is, does H1B transfer impact current in progress H4 EAD application? And the second one is, does visiting India amidst H4 EAD process impact H4 EAD application?
Yeah, so if it's a standalone EAD application, the H-1B transfer won't impact it, right? So you should be completely fine. Now, I have seen situations where an H-1B transfer was done and the individual, the H-4 spouse, had filed both an H-4 and H-4 EAD application. And so after the transfer, what happened is employer A revoked the H-1B petition. So the USCIS officer looking at the H4 EAD, he goes, huh, employer A revoked the H1B petition. And that's the basis on which they've applied for an H4 EAD application. If that petition's revoked, then this person doesn't qualify, for the H4 EAD that they're seeking, right? But if it's just a standalone H4 EAD application, it'll be completely fine. It'll process normally. There should be no issues. Now, coming to traveling to India, yes, you can travel with a pending H4 EAD application. You cannot travel with a pending H4 application, right? So if you have an H4 extension, for example, and you travel, USCIS will deem it to be abandoned, right? So from that perspective, if it's just a standalone H4 EAD, you're completely fine. You're okay to travel.
Okay, Rajesh, you can travel to India if you are having any plans soon. And now we can take up the next question. And this one is from Mathura. Can we travel out of the country while EAD is on extension process? It's a standalone extension.
Yes, absolutely. Same response as the last question.
All right. So Mathura, you can travel too. And now let's go with the next one. This one is from Sri Devi, and it's primary applicant and dependent are on L1, L2 working in US, H1, H4, H4 EAD concurrently filed, H1, H4 approved, H4 EAD is RFE. Can dependent work on H4 EAD receipt notice? Can H4 EAD processing get expedited?
You cannot work on the H4 EAD receipt notice, right? And the reason is because this is a change of status application. You are going from L2 to H4, right? You are not filing an H4 extension in this situation. So as a result, you don't get the benefits of the automatic extension rule. So you are going to need to wait until the H4 EAD is approved in order to start working. Now, in terms of expediting the process, as I outlined earlier, you can always reach out to USCIS to do the expedite request. If it's out of processing time, you can do a a service request, or you can raise a congressional request through your local congressman. And if none of those work, and your delay is very unreasonable in the sense that, hey, look, it's been several months since we filed, 2 or 3 months maybe, and I'm going to lose my job, right? Or I'm going to be placed on an unpaid leave of absence, or I'm going to lose health insurance, right? Those sorts of facts are at play. Then we can definitely litigate your case if none of those other avenues work.
Okay, okay. Let's take up this next one from Masil. Is the process of filing H4 EAD extension online nowadays, or is it still mailing the application and support documents?
For H4 EADs, you still need to mail it. It's still a paper process, unfortunately.
Okay, you'll have to wait for that,
Yeah,
Mason.
it'll come. It'll come.
It'll come for sure. So, Walter Ryan, the next one on YouTube, is asking currently on H4 EAD, planning masters for fall 2024. Should I change my visa to F1 or continue on H4 EAD for future? Which offers better job prospects and tax benefits post graduation, F1 or H4?
Yeah. So I would say, from a tax perspective, right? The type of tax advice I offer is if the IRS issues you like a notice of deficiency, right? Or issues a lien against, your paycheck or something like that, right? That's typically where an attorney can come in and deal with IRS for you. In terms of your benefits post graduation, you're going to need to talk to an accountant, right? In terms of like, are you filing married, filing jointly? Are you filing someone filing as a head of household, married, filing separately? Whatever those different implications could be for your situation, I'd say talk to an accountant. In terms of changing status to F1, right? Um, if you are working a full-time position right now on an H4 EAD and you're maybe going to attend school part-time, right? Just know that on an F1, you have limitations. Like every university has limitations on how many hours you can work, right? So they might say, you can do a CPT, but you can only do it for 20 hours a week, right? So that's going to cut down your hours by half, and maybe that's not okay with you, right? So if you wanted to continue working full time, 40 hours a week without any restrictions, then I suggest staying on the H4 EAD. If you're like, hey, I'm working part time anyways, and you want to avail yourself of the benefits of an F1 status, then you can definitely do that. And there's no problem with it, but it just kind of depends on your circumstances, and what it is you're looking to get out of your program, right? There's some day one CPT programs out there, like University of the Cumberlands, and people attend those, and you can work 40 hours a week doing that, right? So and still get the benefits of an F1. So it just kind of depends on what you're going for and what your individual circumstances.
All right, all right. And remember, you just answered Rajesh Pillai. He's watching us, so he has a follow-up and he says, "Thank you for the info. Mine is standalone EAD extension. I had a query for standalone extension, as you suggested, though it's fine to travel as you just suggested. Does the new I-94 record of H4 EAD applicant might potentially have chances of getting RFE, since there will be mismatch of I-765 documents submitted?"
Yeah. So you can always interfile the updated I-94 record, right? And interfiling basically means when your spouse comes back into the US, you print your I-94 record, you mail a letter to the service center that has your application, and you tell them, "Hey, look, I traveled. I want to update my application with this new I-94 record. Please use this to approve my applications and provide an end date on my H4 EAD accordingly." So interfiling is always an option that I recommend. Even if you don't interfile, it's okay. They're just going to approve the application based on the documentation that's in front of them, right? And they're going to give you the validity date based on the H-1B approval notice and whatever I-94 record maybe you've already provided, right? So in either scenario, you're going to be okay. Whether you interfile or you don't interfile, USCIS is not going to issue an RFE for an updated I-94 record.
Okay. Well, we'll take up another one. This one is from Selena Pillai on YouTube. "I have approved EAD until November 2024 with old I-797, husband's new I-797 till 2025. Can I apply for a new EAD with updated I-94 valid until 2025?"
Yeah, I would say, at least when your filing window opens up, right, which is going to be in May, you get 6 months in advance of time to file one of these applications. So I would say, come May, feel free to renew your EAD card and get it validated until 2025, which will align with your I-94 record. It will align with your spouse's new I-797. If it takes a crazy amount of time to get approved, since your I-94 record is valid until 2025, you will at least get an extension of either 6 months or when your I-94 record expires, right? Whichever one happens first. Um, so I would say definitely feel free to, submit that renewal application when your 6 month filing window opens up.
Mhm. Well, I wonder if Selena Pillai is related to Rajesh Pillai, who we just responded. I mean,
I
yeah, for
was
sure.
thinking the same.
Wondering, that's all. Anyway, taking up another one. This one is from Noel Sound. "Could you share your experience with applying for H1, H4, and H4 EAD in premium processing? Will all three be approved in premium processing? It's the first time applying for H4 EAD."
Yeah. So, when we were talking about the bundling of applications and the fact that USCIS is doing that now, right? Um, it's pretty hit or miss. 50% of the time, I'm seeing that the applications are being approved concurrently, and the other 50%, I'm seeing that they're breaking apart the application still, right? Even though that's not what they should be doing. Um, but even when they break it apart, the delays are not egregious. It might be 1 or 2 months. But for example, I've got a client right now, and he was like, "My wife needs to travel on May 20th. We have to file our, H1B, H4, H4 EAD renewal." And I was like, "Yeah, we can do it in premium processing, but just know USCIS is kind of hit or miss on this concurrent filing." So she might have to just go to a visa stamping appointment abroad in order to come back on an H4. So just know that yes, that is a best practice. Definitely file them concurrently if you can. Um, but also keep in the back of your mind that USCIS tends to do whatever it wants to. And sometimes they will approve it concurrently, sometimes they simply won't.
Okay. We'll take up one more question. This one is from Bhargav Potluri. I filed my H4 EAD standalone application in June 2023. It has been 8 months and I am yet to get my work authorization. I went to India in between. I raised a service request too. What options do I have?
My man, yeah, yeah, this is right. Like this is why this webinar is so relevant, and I'm happy that it wasn't crickets on the Q&A, and that people are in fact facing these delays. I'm not happy that you're facing it. I'm happy that it's relevant, right? In terms of options, right? If the service request hasn't worked, if an expedite request hasn't worked, we have litigated standalone EAD applications on one simple fact, and that was that it's out of processing time, right? I've had some clients who, like last year, for example, I filed a lawsuit for an individual. She was like, I have a standalone EAD application pending and I have a job offer with Deloitte, right? I have to accept this job offer in the next couple of months. Otherwise, it's gone, right? So she was kind of waiting until this job offer came along and she's like, I have to litigate now, right? And so she litigated. We were able to get her the EAD card approved before her joining date, and everything was good in the world, right? So if if the only fact that we have is it's a standalone EAD application and it's out of processing time, we can litigate that case. And typically what we see is that litigation, right? Like when we file a lawsuit, it takes 60 days for the government to respond back. That is the deadline that they have. Oftentimes, within 30 to 45 days, what my data tells me is that within 30 to 45 days, our approvals come back by way of just negotiating the case out, right? Because it's easier for them to approve an application than it is for the US attorney to take several hours to prepare a response to an EAD delay case, right? Takes 5 minutes to approve your application, takes 5 hours to prepare a response. What's USCIS going to do, right? And so I would say, litigation, even if you're just out of processing time and you have no other facts, it can work really well. And, again, within 30 to 45 days, we've seen these applications get approved pretty quickly.
Okay, okay. Well, we'll just take up this last question, I think, and this one is from Rajdeep Chakraborty. What options do we have if I-797A for H4 notice was never delivered to the mailbox?
Yeah, so I'm going to assume that it was your mailbox that it wasn't delivered to. And essentially, what you can do, again, you can go online, e-request, USCIS, just type that in Google. And one of the options on the e-request tool is a notice was not delivered to me, right? So you can input the details of your case, right? Like your alien number, all of those things when you filed it, what your address is. And when you input those details, you can get information. You'll raise a service request essentially to have that notice sent to you. Um, if that doesn't work, you can call the USCIS Service Center, right? They might even be able to email you the receipt notice. So I would say that's one way to approach it. Um, and if it's an approval notice, same thing, e-request, right? Or call USCIS and have them email it to you, right? So whether it's a receipt notice or an approval notice, you can leverage the service request capabilities, or you can call USCIS to get them to email you the approval.
Okay, and I think quickly, Prashant, I'll just take one more minute from you. And this
Yeah.
is from our group actually asking H4 EAD. Hello, everyone. Does anyone know if another H4 EAD application can be filed concurrently if one H4 EAD application is already pending for 9 months in the system?
You can. I've actually just recently had a client do that.
Okay.
They filed an H4 EAD application with me because they needed their spouse validity, for like about 5 months, right? And then when their H-1B renewal came up, they filed a new set of H4 EAD applications with their employer to extend the status beyond like June of this year. So the application we had filed was extending it between February to like June, and the application he then filed was extending it beyond June for the next 3 years, right? So she had two H4 EAD applications pending in the system. There was absolutely no trouble, no problem with it. If the validity dates end up overlapping, chances are USCIS might just deny one, right? And say, hey, look, we don't need to approve two. We don't need to send you two EAD cards if the validity dates are going to overlap or even be the same. But if they're two separate validity dates, they will approve them separately.
All right. So this was actually posted by Shilpa Shri KS in our group. So thank you for the question. And that was the last question we could take up. But viewers out there, wherever you have joined us from, keep posting your questions. You can even mail Prashant directly at info@dubeylawoffice.com. And I'm sure he'll be very happy to reach out to you and give out his answer as well. Thank you so much, Prashant, for being so patient and answering all these questions under the
Yep.
topic today. Thank you for joining us.
Yep. And thank you for having me, guys. Have a good one.
Have a great weekend. Have a happy Friday. I hope to see you again next Friday for sure, Prashant.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Thank you, friends out there, for joining in. This is Immigration and Jobs Talk Show. And well, you can even mail me at nipa@higheritpeople.com or call me in the number 408-335-6444. And don't forget to visit our website, www.higheritpeople.com. And in fact, if you're looking for a project placement, you can also call us in the number 833-412-8472. You can note the number, 833-412-8472. And you can even mail us at support@higheritpeople.com. So anything, career opportunities, EADs, green cards, visas, contact us. We'll be very happy to help you whatever we can. And thank you so much, friends, for joining in. I hope you two are going to have a very happy Friday and a happy March. Actually, it's a new month. So have a good one, all you folks out there. And thank you for joining in today. It's Nipasa Pradhan signing off for now.
Are you an IT consultant seeking a new opportunity? We offer job placement services for US citizens, green cards, EADs, and visa holders. We also sponsor various work visas like H1B, E3, TN, and green cards. 20 plus years of experience in the industry, exceptional employee benefits, highly rated by our employees. Global presence with 200 plus recruiters and direct clients. Connect with us. Call us on the number 833-412-8472 or mail us at support@higheritpeople.com or visit our website www.higheritpeople.com.